Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today. I love to help inspire, educate and motivate others through the voices and through conversations we have on the show. And specifically today, I'm so honored to be joined by someone I've been following now avidly for quite some time. His name is Mark Metry. Mark is a Forbes featured speaker. He interviews everyone from billionaires, New York Times bestselling authors, and world-class human beings on his top 100 podcast. But once upon a time, he's very transparent about this, and he says he couldn't make direct eye contact with anyone, and he suffered a lot from social anxiety, from health issues, and not living the life that he was strategically designed to live. Now, it's very, very different. And Mark has had an incredibly successful career. He has an impact and influences others by, he says, evolving himself. And, you know, the same way he says, you know, he's impacted and empowered by others to upgrade to his next self, version 2.0, which I totally love. He's self-proclaimed curious, energetic leader, loves creating, meditating, writing, exercising, and cooking. He hosts the top 100 podcast, Humans 2.0, and he's had over 4 million plus views, which is just astronomical. His podcast also hit 96 on the top podcasts in the world with Tim Ferriss, NPR, Lewis Howes, and Gary Vaynerchuk. He's been featured in Forbes, Inc., Huffington Post, Fearless Motivation, and many, many other publications. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce everyone who's watching on YouTube and tuning in to the podcast to the totally awesome Mark Metry. Mark, welcome to the show.
Leila, I'm really honored to share the space with somebody that I think is in tune about what's going on in the world as much as you are. It's a real honor to be here, and I'm super, super excited.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much. And for all of our listeners who are tuning in today or watching on YouTube, a lot of them are from Great Britain, where I'm from, and today I'm in Leamington Spa. I thought it would be great just for those who may not have heard of Mark, and I know a lot of people have heard of Mark, but for those who haven't, you know, Mark, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to recently. And, you know, I guess I'd really love to unearth some of the wonderful kind of stories of how you came to be where you are today. And sorry if you're repeating any of this, but I'd love to share some of these pearls of wisdom with our listeners, because I think you have a very inspirational story, and there's lots that we can all learn from you.
That's a great question, Leila. So for me, my parents were from Egypt, and they immigrated. They came over to the U.S. with a green card lottery. They didn't really know anybody in the country. They came here with like $200 in their pocket, just in hopes of giving, you know, me and my older sister Maggie a better chance at opportunity. And so, you know, with that being said, I lived a very awesome childhood. I had great parents who cared a lot about me, always did what was best for me. And, you know, a few different issues that I had that I think that kind of set my environment, that kind of set up the circumstances to create who I was, is, you know, first and foremost, just like myself and a lot of other kids in America today, I was born and diagnosed with a wide variety of autoimmune symptom disorders. So things like asthma, ADHD, insomnia, a lot of digestive issues, things along those lines that affect behavior. And so I was always kind of dealing with that at a young age, but I didn't really know. I just thought that there was something wrong with me. And I didn't actually, you know, understand that I had certain health obstacles that put limitations on my own life. So I just sort of always thought that there was something wrong with me without understanding that piece. And I'd say another big part of that was one of the schools that I ended up growing up in for most of my adolescence was like this very rural small town. It was basically an all white school. There was no diversity whatsoever. It was maybe about me and like two or three other kids that looked different from everybody else in the school. And you combine that with the health issues alongside the, we didn't really have much money. So I'd sort of wear like the same clothes over and over again. And that began to like put me in this mindset where I was just like living in my own bubble. I was isolated. I didn't really have that many deep friends. Like you said, I had, really severe social anxiety. Not just to the point of where, you're afraid to say something, but I was just sort of afraid to be myself. And then that begins to bleed over into so many other areas of your life. And it's like, while I was going through all of that, my coping mechanism, what I began to do to sort of deal with those stresses and struggles was I got on the internet when I was very young. I got on there when I was like in 2000 and like in 2008, 2009. I began to learn about so many different things. I began to take courses. I eventually ended up starting my own YouTube channel when I was like 13 years old.
It's incredible.
I launched so many websites like that were about like different sorts of businesses, like teaching people how to do things. I've honestly lost count at this point, but for me, like a real big early success that I had was when I was 15, and I ended up starting the world's #1 Minecraft server, which basically ended up making a ton of money for me. Like I began to make hundreds of thousands of dollars coming from a background where I was never used to that money at all. And like that began to get me to ask sort of like other questions, because I had sort of achieved like the American dream, or society's definition of success. And I was like, wait, I still think I'm a loser. Like I still think that I have a horrible life. Like I'm not happy. And it's like that is what I think sort of began the shift in me. And by the time I was 18 years old, I began to become a conscious of a lot of problems that I had faced in my life. So like I said, I never knew that I had social anxiety. I never knew that I had health issues. I never knew that there were all these different sorts of pieces and the reasons why I did things. And so when I was 18, I began to become conscious of that for the first time. And I think like a lot of people, I got really uncomfortable, and instead of, sort of tackling that pain head on and like getting real with myself and saying like, okay, Mark, you've got these issues. Everyone's got issues. You can either live your life in this mode for the rest of your life and face even more negative consequences in the future, or you can put your foot down and actually do something about it. And so for me, I I wanted to stay sort of like in this comfort mode. And the way that that looked like, I eventually became like 200 pounds. I ended up like not leaving my house for like a month, like just socially isolating myself, kind of like hitting my own version of like rock bottom. Like there were even a few nights where I was, now when I look back at it, I was suicidal, and I would literally just walk around in the streets of Boston, and I would like secretly fantasize and wish that somebody would just come up and just end my life and would just murder me, because the pain, the emotion that I was feeling, I didn't know how to deal with it. I just wanted it to end. And when I was that young, I didn't develop all the mental tools, all of the stress mechanisms that I have developed now. And so that was just like the most immediate thing that was there for me. And, from that point on, I, I began to travel. That really shifted my perspective. I had a lot of conversations with my parents. I really sat down with myself. I began to sort of orient myself towards the truth, not only just in my own life, but what's going on in sort of the outside world. Eventually, the way that I began to sort of, discover myself, like I had talked about in the beginning bio, it was really through like healthy eating and health, because I had all these health issues that were negatively impacting my brain, that were negatively impacting how I saw the world. And it's like, for me, the moment when I stopped eating a ton of junk food and I just began to eat like whole foods that are from the ground and just, natural healthy things. And then I began to exercise. I began to sleep for 8 hours. Eventually that led me to try out mindfulness meditation and understand what gratitude is, and yoga, and incorporating myself in the community, and creating deep relationships with other people. I really just began to like create this different version of myself and like fight my fears and be truthful to myself. And then eventually like that ended up transforming into, me getting into a point in my life where I was just about to turn 20 this in 2017, where I was like, okay, like what's the next step for me? Like, how can I talk to and get in front of like the world's smartest people, like the real practitioners, like the real experts, the real people that are doing it today, that I have been doing it for 10 years, that are doing it successfully for other people. And I was like, okay, how can a 20-year-old kid get the time to sit down with somebody that is like a legend? And like the strategy that I was thinking is like, okay, podcasts are popping off right now. What if I start this podcast not as a way for me to like brand or to promote myself, or even to like change the world or to impact the world or anything like that yet. But it's like, how can I just create a system for myself that will constantly re-engage myself in self-development and learning from the best of the best? And it's like, that happened. And then I just began to stick with it. And, things really started to take off for me as I began to get, bigger and bigger guests, started learning and applying more. And then, all these accolades from the media and different publications and things like LinkedIn started to sprout out. And yeah, it's been a great journey. I know that was long-winded, but
no, do you know what? That was such a fantastic story. And, a lot of the things actually that you said really, really resonate with me. I love that you start at the beginning and you're talking about, your heritage and being from Egypt, and actually that, where you landed on planet Earth, I guess, into the school and everything like that. That a lot of the kids were quite different. Everything that you said, it completely, really resonates with me. And I really, I was feeling, the story and picturing myself when you were talking through that. And how awesome that you're now in this position, and that you've got so much confidence. You've got so much confidence, and you're all over, lots of these different, very, very well-known publications. You're interviewing the likes of Seth Godin, and I've bought a load of his books. I think he's ace. Ed Myler got here, Gretchen Rubin, David Meltzer. That takes some serious confidence, to do that. Something, I guess, tell me, obviously there's a couple of turning points at at these various phases in your life. The Mark 2.0 as you are right now. What's been, what have been the major realizations almost that you've had most recently with the new and improved version of yourself?
Yeah. That's great. So I think that you'll really resonate with this because, you came from a similar background, but like a real realization that really hit me today is that because, I've faced my own version of the struggle, because I've faced, my own problems in various aspects of my life, like growing up in a place where nobody looks like you. And then your main thought is like, how do I try to blend in? How do I, act as if I'm like everybody else?
Completely.
But then what happens is,
chameleonism.
as you grow up, exactly. And it's like, as you begin to grow up, you then begin to realize that it's like, oh, you actually shouldn't be like everyone else. Like that's not a good thing. And you actually begin to discover, like, because you had this desire, you had this need to be like other people. Now, as you've grown older with sort of perspective, that is actually the thing that makes you successful, because you know that the only way to truly live your life is to be yourself and stick out. And it's like, when you go through every single aspect of life, every area in which you face sort of like struggle, that creates such an insane, abundant opportunity for future success, for future opportunities. And it's like, the reason why I have confidence today is because I had zero confidence for like the first 18 years of my life. And I think there's like a lot of different areas that I could go into, but I think that like one of the number one like aspects, one of the number one questions that people always ask me, like, how do you go from somebody who was like really anxious, had no confidence, to being confident, to talking to these people, to speaking around the world at these events? And it's like, what I did was, when I first became aware of this issue, I began to, read as much as possible. I began to listen to podcasts, and I began to get a sort of like a shallow map at like what I have to do. Like, we all know that, holistically, health is really important. We all know that relationships are crucial for your life, for your mental health, for everything. We all know that, you've got to have something that, you are progressing, that you are advancing towards sort of like your own spiritual purpose, or wherever you kind of person you want to be. And it's like, when I began to look at that, I really began to realize that I was not that kind of person. Like, I think I had some things deep down, but I had to change a lot. And so I would, like, literally, Leila, like when I was first starting out, I'd literally just wake up in the morning and I would like create like an entire plan for myself. I have a lot of issues. I've had a lot of issues. Like, some of the big ones for me were lying. This concept of being dishonest with yourself. And I think a lot of people know, like, okay, you shouldn't lie to other people. That's kind of obvious. But I think a lot of us sort of lie to ourselves. And it's like, when I look back at when I was a kid, I think I was lying to myself to pretend I was socially anxious to not do something that I was required to do in my life. And what I mean by that is this: it's like, you're in a class, and let's say the teacher asks a question, and you instantly know the answer to the question, but you have social anxiety. And then you're like, oh, I'm not going to raise my hand because, you don't admit to yourself that you're socially anxious, but you're like, oh, I'm not going to raise my hand because, that could be wrong. Or I'm not going to raise my hand because that's just, not the answer that they're looking for. Or I'm not going to raise my hand because, oh, I just don't feel like it today. Or it's because I gotta save my energy for this thing, or whatever rationalization we make. And it's like, when I began to understand that, like, truth and honesty is like it's like the survival island in life. It's like the thing that we all need to head towards as sort of like the panacea. And so when I began to realize that, I literally began to like write down goals for myself every day. Like, hey, Mark, don't lie to anybody today. That would be one of my goals. Another goal would be like, hey, Mark, today at 2:30 p.m., sit down for an hour by yourself and try to uncover the previous things in your life that you have lied about. And it would be like all these little tasks, all these little goals that I just began to create for myself, in order to eventually, like, day in and day out of doing this, of like, waking up at 5 a.m., the second I wake up, writing down what I'm like instantly grateful for, because that then sets your perception for the rest of the day, and that like reprograms your brain to, like, at 5:30 meditating, to then whatever it is, like yoga, exercise, all of the right habits, all of the right rituals that I began to identify. And I just began to do that every single day. And then it's like, 2 years pass by, and like you just get this sort of product. And like, here's the thing: I have a ton of fears. I have a ton of failures. I have so many insecurities. I wouldn't even know where to begin. But it's like, I know that, I'm fully aware of that every day. but I just try to make a conscious step towards that right, truthful, sort of like higher self version of myself that I know is the right path that I should be living. And that's not just going to, help me. It's also going to help the closest people in my life. Because honestly, like one thing that I've learned is that the closest people in your life, whether it's your family, your friends, people that you've had relationships with, like once they see you yourself, like move towards what's best for you and develop yourself, and they begin to see like you're doing all these things, they then begin to think like, oh, if that person's been in my life this entire time, and then all of a sudden they just flip the switch and now they're living life the way that they want to, wait, maybe I can do the same thing. And it's like, that's been a major takeaway. And another one is like, there's so many people out there that don't even know us yet, but they will if we keep on this track. And like, who knows how many lives that could affect, right? Like there could be like a 9-year-old that's out like in China today that doesn't have like the resources to get properly educated and is going to live their life in like this path. But it's like, that could also be the kid that if they were given the right tools and resources, they could like invent a cure for cancer. And it's like, maybe that's the way that we should begin to think about it. And like, for me, I don't even know how I got here, but for me, like, really moving towards the truth, being honest with yourself, holding yourself accountable, taking responsibility for your own life. Because once you understand that, then you're actually able to like, not just selfishly move the needle forward in your own life, but also just the people that you know and that you don't know in your life. And it's like, I look at myself when I'm 21, where I came from like being suicidal just like 3 years ago. And it's just like, I just try to imagine like where I'm going to be in 10 years from now. And hopefully it's not about me, but hopefully it's about the impact that I have on other people that, we're like the 11-year-old version of you and I, where we were like too afraid to be ourselves. And like, hopefully if they can hear somebody that is successful talking about all these things in our society that we've stigmatized, maybe that can begin to like, turn the gears, maybe reverse some of like the negative programming that they've adopted or created for themselves. And so, yeah, that's really what I'm just trying to do.
Oh my goodness, there's so much great stuff there. I'm like, where do I start? Do you know what? I concur with I concur with everything that you've said. First of all, I totally love that piece about the free education. I completely, to my heart, believe that education should be free to all. And that's what I love about podcasts. That's what I love about, the modern world, is that actually, yes, okay, there are bad messages out there, but I think if you counteract them with as much good as you can pile on top, someone is going to hear it. And if it changes one person's life, then it's worth it. I also love that piece that you were talking about, the notes, because I totally do that as well. I'm going to send you after this podcast. In fact, actually, I'm in a different place today, but when I'm back up in Manchester, I'm going to send you some pictures of my bedroom, not in a weird way, but I've got whiteboards at the end of my bed in Manchester. I'm sure I'm going to have like no listeners after this has been released, but I've got like a whiteboard. That's awesome. I've got a whiteboard at the end of my bed, and I've got a flip chart as well. A flip chart, and I've also got a number of post-it notes, and I stick them on the wall and I replace them from time to time, and they're just really basic things. I've got goals, I've got aspirations, I've got a healthy body, healthy mind. I really like my quotes, so I'll have little quotes for the day. If I wake up really early, or I wake up in the middle of the night, which I often do, having some new business idea and I can't sleep, I've got to write it on the whiteboard, because otherwise those gems or those pearls or that next idea could be lost in all eternity. And so, weird as it may sound, I totally get the incessant note writing, Mark. I totally get that.
100%. And I'll tell you, like, for me, I literally write every single day. I make sure to journal all the time. I do it in a few different ways. And I think like what you and I do that I think is really powerful is, I think when you write something down and you're able to see your thought in the real world, it creates a feedback loop. And I think it creates this sort of self-amplifying feedback loop that is sort of unreachable when you're just thinking about it in your own mind, right? I think like it's like the average human has something like 60,000 thoughts a day. And when you're all up in that, it's really easy to lie to yourself. It's really easy to not do the things that you know you should be doing. But it's like if you write that down, you then begin to see it in the real world. And your mind sees that in the real world. And then it begins to influence and be like, oh, okay. And it's just like, I think that's definitely a massive trait in all of the most high performing people that I know. They write everything down. I think that's definitely a big part of it, 100%.
Which I guess leads me on quite nicely to, because I can't believe we've been talking for half an hour already, and there's a million other things I want to ask you. But I've been writing down here. Look, just actually these like four. Look there, Mark Metry. So there's like 5 pages of notes I've been writing down as we've been talking. So since we've been talking about writing stuff down, I'm just going to summarize. Just quickly here for our listeners, and then. Any other pieces that you'd like to add, feel free to do so. But I've learned such a lot from this conversation. I'm so pleased that we've managed to connect, because as you know, I follow you and comment on all of your posts and things like that. But for all of our listeners who are out there, and for anyone who is new, or anyone who has, been affected, I guess, by anything that we've talked about today, if you are struggling with anxiety or depression or any kinds of disorder, whether it be an eating disorder, other personal issues that you're having, please reach out to either of us, frankly, or reach out to friends, hopefully people that you can trust, and family, and try and share some of those worries that you're having, because you know what? You are totally not alone. There are lots and lots of other humans 2.0, to use Mark's terminology, who are out there probably going through the same things. So seriously, embrace and be grateful that you're here on planet Earth, because there's some wonderful people that you've just not connected with yet. And I say yet, and I emphasize that a lot, because there are so many different creatures on this planet. There will be people out there who can connect with and who will be able to resonate with some of the things that you are going through. And, some of the pieces that I've taken away from Mark today are, really be true to yourself. Really have that confidence to kind of step out. If you're one of if you're the black sheep in a crowd of white, then embrace that. That is great. It's great to be different, and you'll realize as you grow older and throughout your career that actually, having these unique differences are what makes you who you are. And so, keep on keeping on, and, try and keep the purpose piece there. If you're like Mark and I, then start with post-it notes and start writing everything down, because you know what, those little pearls of wisdom, they might come back to you. Like Mark says, the feedback loop, it's important, and everything in life really has a meaning. So, I hope you've been inspired by today.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think, I think confidence is such a major piece, but I think if somebody like myself has gone from a place of never being confident, it's not a natural feeling to be confident, and or people in my position. And the advice that I always give is don't wait to feel confident to do something. I think a major part of this, and this is what I had to do, but it's like, you've got to fake it until you make it in that perspective. So it's like, I wasn't confident. So I began to build the steps to be confident. So I'd write down on a piece of paper, Mark, today go outside and talk to 10 strangers. And it's like, I didn't feel confident enough to do that, but it's sort of similar to going to the gym. And it's like, even though you don't want to do it, you just power through and you do it. And then if you do that consistently enough, you eventually end up building this confidence. So it's like, if anyone's listening and they heard that and they're like, oh man, I don't have the belief, I don't have the confidence to be able to do these things. You have literally just got to fake it until you literally feel it. And it happens eventually if you put in enough reps at that specific activity. And you can it's really just a muscle, and it eventually gets formed. So I know that was a major like excuse that I had. I was like, oh, I've just got to wait to be inspired. Oh, like when I feel confident, then I'll do it. But it's like, if you've never felt that before, that doesn't just like naturally come. Like you've got to build it and form it yourself with your own two hands, even if you have no idea what it is you're doing.
Those are really wise words. And you're completely right. You've just got to take those baby steps. And before you know it, you'll be surprised at how far you've come. And Mark, how can we get in touch with you for people who, obviously, should say actually, of course, you can follow Mark. He's got a great podcast, Humans 2.0, and he's obviously all over LinkedIn and all the social media channels and the various kind of Twitter, Instagram handles, etc. But Mark, can we visit you at your website as well? Because I know you've got a couple.
Yeah. I mean, my website is just my name, markmetry.com. But I'd say if anybody wants to connect with me for whatever reason, you can just send me an email to mark@vudream.com. And I try my best to respond to everybody.
Perfect. So that email again then is mark@vudream.com, or you can get hold of Mark on www.markmetry.com. Or what I'm going to do is summarize today's show into the show notes on the website, which are on www.leilamckenzie.com/podcast. And this will also be on Apple and all the favorite podcast apps that you may have, and also on the YouTube channel as well. Mark, I'd love to have a chat with you off air when you have a moment as well. But I want to say, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's amazing to have you. It's great to have an American voice as well on the show. Also, we're recording in Britain today. And yes, hopefully we will meet in person, and I will speak to you again on the show very, very soon.
100%. Leila, you're a fantastic host.
Thanks so much. My name's Leila Mackenzie, and you've been listening to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast, with you every fortnight. Thanks so much, and see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.